Welcome to the Yoga Therapy Hour podcast with Amy Wheeler. We're a global community of yoga therapists and related professionals who are sharing our knowledge and experience with one another to make the world a better place for all of us to thrive. On this podcast, we have deep and thought-provoking conversations that we hope will nourish you and make you feel more connected to yourself and to others. Feel free to continue these conversations on our private Facebook group called Yoga Therapy Hour Podcast with Amy Wheeler, and listen at the end of the podcast each week as we'll be giving away a special gift. Remember, we have a mobile app coming out May 2nd, 2022 that tracks mental health and so much more using the foundations of yoga and Ayurveda. Welcome to this interview with Lori Rubenstein Fazzio. And I've known Lori for over a decade now and have always found her to be just a lovely, lovely human being. Many of the students that have studied with both of us have said she is their favorite teacher. And she's such a deep person, a soft-hearted person, a sensitive person, somebody who really thinks deeply, feels deeply, and is an introvert. So on so many levels, I feel like a soul sister to her. Something that Lori and I have both struggled with during all of these years of trying to understand what yoga therapy is and how we can bring it to the world in order to serve humanity in a digestible way, in a way that Western allopathic medicine can kind of buy in and understand what we're doing. But we both have this deep need to keep the yoga philosophy, keep the ancient teachings intact. And I think, as you'll hear in this interview, that is not an easy thing to do. Lori is a professor at the Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles. She is a professor of yoga studies, and she's constantly having to juggle the ancient Sanskrit and the ancient texts with modern clinical experience as a yoga therapist, and trying to bring these things together in a way that can be useful to people. And it is not an easy job. And I think in this interview, Lori and I come to an agreement about where are those places in clinical practice in Western allopathic medicine that we can bring the true teachings of yoga beyond the asana, beyond just pranayama or meditation or breathing. What is it that we need to make sure stays intact as we bring this forward into healthcare? And that could be mental health care, that could be physical health care. And we both agree that it's important not to try to be all things to all people. We are a generalist in terms of generalist yoga therapist. However, there's people already out there doing really good work, like chiropractors, like acupuncturists, like psychologists. How do we not walk on their tread? How do we make sure that they feel safe and not even competitive with us, but yet own what it is that we do well that's different than them and show them how it can help them? That's really, I think, the essence of what Lori shared with us today. She has some really great clinical experience at the Venice Family Clinic for many, many years, and talking about her experience of bringing yoga therapy into this clinic and what were the pitfalls and what can she see that they could have done better, how might they approached it differently, and the importance of having your colleagues, medical doctors, nurses, psychologists, chiropractors, acupuncturists, the whole lot of them, experience what we do so they really don't have to think through it cognitively. They can just feel it, be it, and understand it. So I love this interview with Lori. I hope you do too. And all of the wonderful things she has to share, I think, can be of great service to all of us. And so here's Lori. Welcome, Lori. So nice to be with you today. It's like having an afternoon tea together.
It's so nice to be here with you.
Where do we want to begin? We have so many places we could go, but I think where I'd like to start, I think a lot of our listeners know you. They've heard you speak at Sitar. You've been a leader in the field. And for decades, you were a very, very well-known and successful physical therapist turned yoga therapist. So I'd like to kind of hear the story of how you had been focusing on the physical body and helping people through PT, and then started to lean into more of the spirituality and the subtle body, and what that transition was like. Can you tell us that?
Sure. I think it's kind of twofold. It was my personal yoga journey, and then how my personal yoga journey and my physical therapy professional world were separate, and then how they melded together. Because I started in yoga a few years after I became a physical therapist. This is back in the early 90s. And I was in search of spirituality. I had had some, I guess what we would say, mystical experiences, and I wanted to understand them. And so I looked into yoga. And so as I was practicing yoga, I was very interested in meditation. And as the 90s got going, there were lots of Krishnamacharya-based classes that started to sprout up. And so I started to attend those, having began in more of a meditation, spiritual type of yoga practice, then going into the asana from there. And I loved it. I loved all of it. So that was kind of how I got into yoga on my own journey, starting in the spiritual and then ending in the physical, or joining in the physical, I should say. And as a physical therapist, I was working with a lot of people in chronic pain. And as I was studying chronic pain, one of the fields that chronic pain was linked with is neuroplasticity, and how the brain changes when one has chronic pain. Because I was also studying yoga and starting to learn more about meditation and yoga practices, and learning about how those practices change the brain in a very different way. And I looked at them, and it was like, wait, these need to come together, because the positive changes to the brain and the physiology from yoga were the opposite of what the changes were in chronic pain. And I thought, well, people who are in chronic pain need yoga, because that seems like the answer. And that was really how I started to link that in. At the same time, though, lots of yoga teachers or people who were starting to practice yoga were coming to me with physical injuries from their yoga and asking for advice as a physical therapist for their asana and for the postures, what they could do to be able to heal their, quote, yoga injuries. So it was a little bit of twofold in that way. And I was fascinated by the subtle body. As I learned about yoga, anatomy, and physiology, because I'm one of those people who feels a lot. So words aren't my best form of communication necessarily. My easiest, I shouldn't say best, my easiest form of communication. I'm one of those introverted, empathic people. I feel so much, and it's hard to find words to express these immense sensory experiences or feelings or knowings or awarenesses. And I found subtle body was a way that kind of felt like home. Understanding subtle body, this feels more like home than necessarily just this physical structure for me on my own personal journey. So I actually met with somebody who practiced a realm of shamanic medicine to help me heal something going on in my heart. I had a relationship that ended. And I was lying on the table. This is Reverend Kate Roger, and she's amazing. And I had had a psoas injury from prior. And I had some numbness in my leg. And if I ever lied down flat for years, 15 years had been going on, my leg would go numb. So on the table with her working on my heart, I was moving around trying to get comfortable for my leg. And she said, "What's going on?" I said, "Oh, it's not related. It's my leg." And she said, "Mm-hmm." Yeah, like it is.
Right. Uh-huh.
And at the time, no, not related. 100%. I saw the ultrasound. I saw my psoas, his scar tissue on the nerve. I know exactly. I saw my MRI. I know this is physical. Yeah, yeah. But in her world, no, this was connected. And we did a process, and I left there. And not only was the pain gone, but the awareness of this link was in my consciousness at that point. So 15 years of pain gone like that.
And never came back.
Maybe on 2-3 occasions since then. And that was many, over 15 years ago, maybe little teeny bits. And it was always linked with that heart. Like there's a link to it. When I would feel the pain, I knew there was something going on in my emotional realm. So of course, being this physical therapy, science-based person, I grew up in a family. My father was a doctor. My brother's a doctor. My parents published a medical journal. This was very much my science realm. It was too woo-woo for me. And it was my own judgment, which has taken me a long time to work on unwinding this. So I went and got another ultrasound from a physician friend of mine out of curiosity. Exactly the same. Looks no different.
Which is so important for people to hear, that the ultrasound MRI looks exactly the same, but for 15 years you had pain and then you didn't. That's important for people to hear.
Yes, and because people come in and they become identified with their diagnostics, right? I'm a cancer patient. I have a herniated disc, and people will tell me I have a herniated disc, and so they change their lifestyle. And then I ask when it was, and they say it was 20 years ago. And I said, the body heals. Right. But people, because of our medical world, it becomes this almost identity that people carry around. And it's heavy baggage, and it really does weigh us down. And there is a balance. There are things to be wise about. And so I think injuries can teach us lessons in how to move through life, as well as their opportunities to learn about ourselves. And that's how I saw it. It was an opportunity to learn about my own samskaras, my own way of being in the world. And it was revolutionary for me. And so I thought, that's fascinating. It's still there, but I don't feel any of it. Not only that, but I couldn't stretch before. I couldn't do any lunge stretches. I'd get a sharp shooting pain. I still have the numbness. The numbness has not changed, but the pain is gone. Now I can do all that. No problem whatsoever. I can do everything. So I started to experiment. I went and studied with her for many years then. And then I started to experiment with patients. And I had a patient once who had a frozen shoulder. This was the first person I tried this on. She happened to be a renowned psychologist. So I knew that she had the toolkit should something arise, because we're diving into the depths of someone's being with this type of work. Mm-hmm. And she had an MRI. You could see the capsule was shrunk, and we had been doing our forceful. She was at the stage of forceful physical therapy. Well, we really stretch it, really get it going. We got it moving, but we could not get her hand behind her back at all. I said, "You want to try something with me? Just like a little experiment." And she said, "Sure." So we did this visualization, and I had studied somatic experiencing with Peter Levine for 2 years. So I did a blend of this, learning the shamanic work from Reverend Kate, learning the somatic experiencing and yoga, a whole bunch of things. I just kind of melded it together and followed this intuitive kind of feeling with it. And she saw these octopus tentacles. And we went through a whole process I don't want to share for too personal to reveal her. She got off the table and her hand went all the way behind her back. And we looked at each other and said, "What the 4-letter word just happened here?" And I was blown away, really blown away. And that's what led me to try to figure this out. I wanted to understand it. So I wrote to people. And I started doing it with all the patients, wrote to people around the world. And Dr. Ellen Langer from Harvard, who wrote the counterclockwise study, she reached out and said, "Yeah, let's work on something." So we did a small pilot study, and 37 people, all the people in the experimental group, every single one of them had improvements in their symptoms, some either resolution or majority gone, and their function improved.
Due to the visualization.
Yes, And I did what I thought was an assessment and another visualization. Well, that was the visualization. What we did was a memory. So we did the visualization, which is what I attribute it to now, but we also did a memory visualization, which was based on her counterclockwise work, where we went back in time to a time before somebody had their injury or illness and relived it through the senses. So all the indriyas, we went through the smells, the sights, the sounds, the taste, everything. And when we do that, oftentimes people's nervous system goes back in time. They start moving like they were when they were younger. So it was a combination of those. Since then, I tend to do the visualization more often. I find that's a little less triggering if I don't know somebody, because oftentimes there's a trigger that may arise from the past work, whereas the visualization tends to be a more neutral approach. And so that sent me to study more. And where I kind of am at is considering it part of a subtle body awareness, part of like this subtle body that we don't look at in modern medicine. It's really the only place I see it is in the study of body awareness, which is now looking at the fact that we have awareness outside of our body. And in fact, if someone has chronic pain, let's say in their left hand for a long, long time, years of chronic pain, the space to the left is distorted. So they take their non-affected side and put it on the affected side, and it becomes distorted. There's some research that's looking at this. But my interest isn't getting it to the people. That's really where my interest lies.
So, Lori, was there any, I think I heard a hint of there was a little resistance inside of you because your parents were these medical journal people. And how did you make that jump from, I'm a physical therapist, to, I think I believe that a visualization of an octopus on someone's rotator cuff actually helped a frozen shoulder, right? Like, how did you make that jump and get comfortable with that? Because I think people want to do that, but it's very hard to do.
I have goosebumps all over, and I feel like I'm going to cry when someone says the truth, because you used the word jump. Mm-hmm. And it was pretty much a jump, and I'll tell you why. I was always vacillating with this, and I went horseback riding in 2007. One of my patients said, I can't pay my bill. Can we do a little trade? I used to ride when I was younger, but because my hands were my work, right? I stopped skiing. I stopped all the things that could injure these tools. These were my tools. I did a lot of manual therapy before. And I said, I'll go in the ring. I'll do gentle, no big deal. And I think jump, because I used to jump horse. That's what I like to do that. So I was riding the horse, and the horse didn't feel right. Something was wrong. And I sensed that. And there's so many layers to this lesson. And to me, this is yoga. This is my biggest tool in yoga, is the philosophy and the understanding of it, is that I had a knowing inside, get off this horse, something's wrong. And I told this client of mine who was a riding instructor, Beauty's acting weird. And she said, oh, Beauty's just testing you. Tell me something to do. Just stand up in the stirrups, hold the mane, and trot, go fat, trot, walk, and tell Beauty you're in charge here. This is what you should do. And I didn't listen to my gut. I gave my power to someone else. I wasn't listening to those messages. And Beauty tripped. What had happened was the shoes for the horse was put on wrong. And Beauty was saying, I'm in pain, get off of me. And I knew something was wrong. And when Beauty collapsed, I went flying, like that jump. It was like flying off. And the moment I landed, I knew my arm didn't move. My arm was just hanging there. And I knew in that moment, my career was probably over. And I heard angels, whether it was an inner knowledge or angel, whatever way we like to look at it, there's a silver lining here. You just have to find it. And I had crushed my elbow, separated my shoulder in two places, and separated the two bones in the forearm. So it's diastasis. It was pretty bad. And I had to have surgery. And my doctor, who happened to be the doctor who sent me the most patients, my primary referring doctor, said, you can't practice anymore. You've got to figure something else out. And I felt like it was the universe telling me I've been making myself sick, working myself to the bone, building my private practice and working with patients all day, doing the business and the practice and all of it. And I couldn't use my hands then for about a year and a half. I was off work for a year and in rehab. And then I got injured by a therapist, which set me way back when I was about to go back to work. And that was really the straw that just kind of broke me in that. And I felt it was telling me, you need to change. So when I started to go back to work, the tools that I had were not those tools. And so I started to work with the yoga more, all the realms of yoga, and watched how amazing it was. So I felt like I was literally thrown, like we would in a jump, into this. And so about 2.5 years later, I still couldn't do certain things with my arm. It was still a struggle. And I'd been to so many physical therapists and I couldn't bend my arm more than 90 degrees. And it didn't go fully straight. And the physical therapist said to me, well, if that's all you get, that's a great outcome. And I said, a great outcome for who? I can't put my hair up. I have to eat. I have to eat like this. I can't. There were so many things I couldn't do, even though I know many people are much worse off than that. So one day I was walking my dog and I said, oh, Lori, do what you do with your patients. Yeah. Why haven't you done this before?
Isn't that funny? I have that happen all the time. It cracks me up. We know so much and we don't do it for ourselves.
Why is that?
I don't know. It's so annoying. And then when you remember, you're like, oh.
Yeah. And I think, you know what? It was divine timing. I visualized my elbow, and guess what? I didn't have one. I had a bloody hand, and it was across the street. And I looked down and I'm like, my arm's attached here. I closed my eyes. Oh my gosh, my hand's bloody and it's across the street and there's no elbow. Lori, I do what I call psychic surgery. Give yourself an elbow. And so I went through the whole process that I had worked with so many patients with. And this was what set me on the path. Was I got home and I wasn't moving my arm, but in my mind's eye, I was bending back and forth and I was seeing it start to move.
And we would say that is you were basically either preparing or starting to get the neural pathways functioning again.
Yes. And the fact that my elbow wasn't there was my brain had dissociated. It was just gone. It didn't exist in my homunculus anymore. Yeah. So I just naturally, when I got home, I had a baseball cap on. I took the baseball and I couldn't believe it. My arm bent and it didn't fully go straight, but it bent. And I just, what just happened here?
Was that after one psychic surgery?
That one session, my one walking my dog, 20 minutes maybe? Yeah. And that was 2.5 years after it had happened. And that was I thought, okay, Lori, this is how many times does the universe have to tell you this is something to focus on? This is a way to go.
And were you able to own it at that point? Or was that just the discovery and the owning it came later?
You're spot on. The owning it is still happening, to be honest. It's still happening. I think that's been the journey of my own yoga. So this is all the professional is getting it out there. And then my own yoga is recognizing my own samskaras and vasanas, my own belief system and how I was raised and all these things of why I wasn't really owning that, because I'm also in a scientific world that looks at things one way. And I feel really strongly that these worlds need to bridge. I feel like this translator, this bridging it's not totally different, but it's like we're speaking different languages, but it's still a human being. It's still the human experience. And so I would say that I have really made gains in that inner strength. And I'm at this place now where is this going to go? I'm also in that stage of life where it's like, what's this last chapter of contribution?
Mm-hmm.
What do I want it to look like? And this is a piece of it. And I do have the clarity of, I don't want the energy that I put into it in this chapter of my life to be necessarily what I thought it was years ago, which were scientific papers to explain this. I don't think it's fully explainable with what we have now. So it would still be theoretical with maybe some insights. But B, I'm afraid it would be seen by just a few clinicians, and that's really where it would stay. And so where I'm focused now is perhaps writing a book and getting it out there to the public. I really like to simplify things, and I'm a kind of boots on the ground, let's get this out there. Yeah.
You know, we were talking a few minutes before the podcast, and you said that there was a time where like you lived and breathed the research and evidence-based medicine, and it's so important, and that's what's going to take the field of yoga therapy forward. But what you've come to realize after being so educated in all of those research studies is that every 5 years they come up with new research studies basically showing that we really don't even know 5% of what's going on. So can you talk a little bit more about that? Because you're fully invested, but you also realize there's so much more that we'll never know.
Yeah, and we need the research. So I don't want to, I recognize it, and I do. I believe I teach the students to create evidence-informed programs with an awareness that research is a piece, but it's not the only thing. I think about breast cancer and hormones in women where there's been massive studies. And there was a period of time when they say, everybody take hormones. And then they said, no, everybody don't take hormones. And then they come back to, yes, hormones are good for these people at this point in time, but not for these people at this point in time. And part of where I'm watching the research world go is a little bit more in the way that we look at it from maybe an Ayurvedic perspective of Vata, Pitta, Kapha. Mm-hmm. Right? What is somebody's dosha? What might be good for Vata might not be for someone who's Kapha.
Yeah.
And so in this world of modern medicine, personalized medicine, and recognizing even like microbiome research, that we're barely touching on the surface. And yet modern medicine now says, yes, microbiome is integral to mental health, Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, mental health, so many things. Ayurveda, yoga, they've been saying this for a very, very long time. And so my interest in the work that I do now is looking at the ancient sciences and how can we meld these and understand it from a modern perspective with all the knowledge, not this or that, but really bridge these together instead of just trying to recreate the wheel. Because the more research is going, the more I see it matching to what a lot of it was saying, not all of it, but a lot of it. So yeah, I think it's needed. And I think we need to recognize that it's limited. Yeah.
So along that line, you are with a group of people that is bringing out a yoga research journal. Is that right?
Yes. So part of this bridging that I was speaking about in these worlds of modern medicine and yoga is also a bridging of modern yoga studies and the therapeutic applications or other applications. And I teach in a master's program, and that's the world of humanities and modern yoga scholarship and such. And yet I work in the world of yoga therapy and the applications of yoga. And I started to notice that these two worlds they're separate. They're just completely separate worlds.
Okay, let's pause there for a moment, because I don't think most people understand that. So unpack that just a little bit, because I think people cannot imagine how the academic world of yoga is different than yoga therapy.
Yeah. Oh, there's so much to unpack here, because there's another layer in there, which is you've got modern Western yoga scholars, and then you've got the yoga scholars in India. And there's also lots of separation, let's just say. I prefer to step back and look at that and see where can we build bridges, because a lot of modern yoga scholarship, which is in the humanities realm, is textual based. So we're looking at the texts and they're analyzing texts, and there's some amazing work being done, really understanding the first textual references to certain things, even really deepening our understanding. So there's a lot of great value in a lot of the work being done. James Malison, Jason Birch, Mark Singleton, they're doing great work. At the same time, the texts this is an oral tradition. This is an oral tradition that's very complex. And so looking at texts without really diving into the oral tradition, which is not in research, what do you say, right? It's where does that come from? It's like a telephone.
Somebody told somebody for 1,000 years.
Right. And so that gets, I would say, in the modern scholar work can be some acknowledge it and some dismiss it. And I think that is a form of, maybe I might call it academic colonialism, which is these are Indian. It comes from a culture in India, and some may prefer to call that South Asia, but it comes from the Vedic culture, and there's also Buddhist threads. They were all there at the same time, right? That was all there at the same time. And to try to compartmentalize it all, it can have lots of challenges to that, because things don't fit in neat boxes that everybody wants to do in research. It just doesn't work that way. And when COVID hit, I had this amazing opportunity to join in with Dr. Ananda took the ashram online. And it really opened my eyes even more for the value of a guru parampara, like to really of the oral tradition. And I have to say, practicing practices that my scientific mind would say, how is that even possible? And then you practice it with Shraddha, with that faith, and amazing experiences happen. We can't discredit that. That's what the yoga is. That's how it was. So there's a lot of issues with that, and yet I'm in the modern scholar world, and that's I'm in the academic world, and I see the value for it, and I see the harm, and I see the value, and I see the harm, and that's how lots of things are. And I think everybody has good intent. Everybody who I've met has great intent. I haven't met anyone who has malicious intent. That's not true. I shouldn't say that's true. There is some, I think they think it's all good. But in the yoga therapy world, some of it's in the clinical realm, right? Trying to fit into the modern allopathic model. And some of it's more in the traditional mold of yoga. And the humanities isn't necessarily a part of that. It's very much the practical application. And I identify as a practitioner scholar. Some identify as scholar practitioners, some as practitioners, some as scholars. And I really believe that we all have a place here to contribute for knowledge together. When someone dedicates their life to the scholarly study, maybe analyzing Sanskrit, that helps me as a practitioner to better understand. So I value that. But again, if that's all it is, it's missing the practitioner. And when we practice and we don't really understand it, then there's limitations there. So this journal is called the Journal of Applied Yoga Studies. Marlissa Sullivan, who we've had these conversations for so long, and Dr. Meena Ramanathan, who is in Pondicherry at the Center for Yoga Therapy Education and Research with Dr. Ananda Bhavanani, we teamed up and said, let's create this bridge. Let's create this bridge with all these worlds, and where people can share how yoga is being brought into the world for betterment, be it for healthcare, education, social justice, environmental reasons. Yoga has so much to offer for all of that. And so that's where we put it out. We really wanted the theory behind it. We wanted people to explain. Maybe a clinical study might say, yoga is used and it's helpful for back pain. And they may or may not even list what the yoga was. Maybe. We're looking at, well, what informed the yoga that you used? Why? Why was that pranayama used? Why were those asanas used? Why was that meditation used? What's the yoga in this? Let's share that so people better understand yoga and recognize it's not a tool, a technology tool to be applied, it's so much more than that.
Which, you and I have had these discussions about almost, I don't know, I feel sometimes a little heartbroken when I realize that Western allopathic medicine, for the most part, wants us to fit into their evidence-based research box. And anything that we've been talking about today in terms of spirituality or visualization or the ancient texts, sometimes it can get shut down in those settings. And that, not always, but sometimes, and that has left me a little heartbroken because I personally am unwilling to bring it into those settings and leave that out, right? And I know you had some experience with this at the Venice Family Clinic, if I'm not mistaken. And so can you talk a little bit about that? How, what did they want at the clinic? What did they not want? And how did you navigate that? And how did that impact you personally?
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to go back and highlight and acknowledge you for not conforming and staying true to the yoga, because we need that so much. And all the amazing work that you've done, be it through all the tools, especially when I was talking about boots on the ground. I mean, you're bringing all these tools, even the app that you have coming out, all these amazing things to the world that has the essence of yoga in it. And I think from what I'm about to share, that is going to be a catalyst for the modern medical world, and be it through the patients to the doctors or whatever avenue that goes, to start to appreciate what that is. And so I'm just grateful to hear that.
Can I just say, Lori, that is exactly because nobody would accept me the way that I believe we need to do it, which is to take those ancient texts and the philosophy and the wholeness of yoga. It seemed like nobody wanted that. So I'm like, well, fine, I'm going to do my own thing. And if it's a complete flop, oh, well, kind of a Arjuna moment, like I'm just going to do it and see what happens. But I really do hope that someone finds that interesting and doesn't want to boil it down to do this posture for that particular pain. Like I don't want to do that. So tell me what's your experience?
Yeah, I think that's limiting, and it's physical therapy for me. I don't see the difference between doing asanas for back pain and as yoga therapy for physical therapy. To me, that's PT. Yoga has so much more. I try to help the students recognize the essence of yoga. So Venice Family Clinic. So back in 2013, I think it was, Larry Payne and I piloted a yoga therapy internship where our students could then go into a medical clinic, integrated medical clinic, and work one-on-one for doing yoga therapy.
And then, was it a pain clinic primarily? Was that?
So the Venice Family Clinic is in Los Angeles. It's the largest medical clinic for the underserved. It has a large homeless population it serves, day workers, a variety, but it's for the underserved in Los Angeles. And they have what's called an integrative medicine pain clinic. So all the primary care practitioners from around the city can refer their patients, if they have chronic pain, to this weekly clinic that they could get. At the time, it was acupuncture, chiropractic. There is a psychologist. They don't all see that. There's a Feldenkrais person. They don't all get those. And an allopathic physician. At the time, it was Dr. Miles Spar. Amazing, amazing doctor who understood really the value of yoga. And so they welcomed us in to bring yoga therapy to the picture. Well, first off, many people have a preconceived notion of what yoga is. And if they don't know what yoga therapy is, they think they know what yoga therapy is because they have an idea of what yoga is. And it's either, I can't do that, or what's that going to do for me? They think of it as this physical exercise. And so the patients weren't that interested in coming.
Because the patient could say, I'd like chiropractic and yoga therapy or acupuncture, but no yoga therapy.
There was, I can't do yoga. I'm in chronic pain. What am I going to do for yoga? So the majority of patients didn't want to come see us. And the doctors didn't know to refer to us. They didn't really understand. So we had to have meetings to talked about what we did. And while we would occasionally share what we do, in retrospect, one of the things I learned is that words don't really mean anything. They need experiences to really understand it. Otherwise, we're talking to a bit of a blank wall there. So what happened was acupuncture and chiropractic had really long wait lists, very long wait lists. So Dr. Spar would say, why don't you try yoga therapy while you're waiting? Just try it. And what I learned in both my physical therapy practice when it was getting going and in this clinic is, if you're trying to get referrals, and this is for your viewers out there too, the listeners out there, sometimes it's helpful to say to a practitioner, send me your most difficult client. Send me somebody that you haven't really been able to help or struggle, that you don't think I'm going to cause harm, and let me just see what I can do. Because if you help that person, you've opened their eyes to the work that you do. Because
they may not be able to understand what's going on, but they're like, how did you help that person? That's amazing.
Exactly. We've all tried and nothing worked. So that's what started happening, was these patients who had been cycling through the system were suddenly having transformative experiences. Like, I'm talking years of pain resolved, or hypertension. And because they all have multiple comorbidities, hypertension, obesity, diabetes, chronic pain, anxiety, depression, that's usually the package we got, add in some other diagnoses as well. All of a sudden, all of it would start to be improving. And we even had somebody who had been homeless and, really down in the dumps, who then got a place to live, got a job, and really and he said, I found my home on my yoga mat. I found who I was. I found my home is me. That's my home. And so that started to wake them up a little bit to what we were doing. But when we came in, they said we had to, I look at it, I describe it like this: fitting a square peg in a round hole. To do that, you have to shave the edges off, right? That's the essence that you're saying. I don't want to shave that off. That's the essence.
I don't.
Right?
Please don't tell me I have to do that.
No, but to get in the door, to get through the door, we sort of did. So what happened was, we were told we could do asana, but we had to call it postures. We could do pranayama, but we had to call it breathing. And pranayama is more than breathing, but that's what we had to call it. And we could do meditation, and we could call it meditation. That's what we could do. That's pretty much what we were told we could do. So that's what we did. But I'll be honest, we did a little other than that. We didn't necessarily put it in there.
Don't tell. Once that office door is shut, they have no idea.
Because it's inherent, like some of the visualizations, some of the conversation, there was a little bit of yoga nidra. There's other things that were in there, but it all kind of fell in those realms. It was all safe. And so what happened was, as patients were getting better, we started to gain their attention. So we would have these grand rounds meetings where all the modalities would meet, and one modality would present a case, and then the others would share what their medicine might do in that situation. That's how we learned about each other's medicine. So this is a key piece that I really wanted to share for anybody who's getting out there in the world, because this is what we learned, I think, through our mistakes, but I think we learned, which was, we tried to fit ourselves into their mold. We translated everything. So we talked about things such as, with the asanas, how we were making them stronger and more flexible. And we talked about all the musculoskeletal for the chiropractic. We talked a little bit about energetic for the Chinese medicine, for the acupuncture. But we didn't really share the essence, because they didn't really want to hear it then. And what I found from that was, the chiropractors thought, we already do that. Why do we need you? And the acupuncturists, we already do that. Why do we need you? Now you're my competition. Why would I send a patient to you? I can do that. So it developed, and then they were upset because we were helping patients that they weren't. And so they felt threatened. And so they didn't want to send their patients. They would send the worst person they couldn't help. Then Dr. Spar, who's amazing, he was really like, tell us more, tell us more. So first we shared the Panchamaya model, and he loved it. And he encouraged all the other practitioners to follow that. He said, this is how every medical practitioner should be looking at their patients, looking at that from the physical, from the energetic, from the mental, emotional, from their belief system, wisdom, and their spiritual bodies, all of that, the biopsychosocial spiritual model.
Right.
Then once we felt more comfortable, then we started to share the yogic science. Then we started to teach them about the gunas, the doshas, the vayus, the nadis, all these yoga subtle body, and the philosophy, samskaras. They ate it up. They loved it. They were like
the clients or the actual
the medical
practitioners.
The practitioners.
Wow.
They were eating it up. Tell me more. They started to understand, and I think we started to understand. I like round more than square, but the square shape, this unique octagonal, I will say octagonal shape, or actually a 6-pointed star. How about that? Anahata. They understood the 6-pointed star shape that we were, and how it became distorted when we tried to fit it into the round hole. And they started to become fascinated, and we started to develop a mutual respect between modalities. Because if somebody had a real musculoskeletal issue, I really had to encourage the yoga therapist, this is not your lane. Yes, it's a piece of your lane. Send that to the chiropractor. That's their lane. You own your lane. Don't try to be all lanes. And sometimes I think in yoga therapy, because we do work so holistically, that we can think we run in all the lanes. And that was really to our detriment, because other practitioners didn't want to welcome us in. And languaging like, other practitioners only do this, yoga therapists, we do it this way. That turns other practitioners off. It's not really respectful to the other practitioners. So I really encourage that we show up and say, with deep respect for other practitioners, and then say how we can work together as a team. And that's what we learned along the way. And
but could you have come in with the Panchamaya model and the gunas and the doshas? Like, did you have to do this, the square peg in the round hole for the first, year before you could introduce the real deal?
Question. Such a great question. It seemed like there was a fear of what we did, and it just wasn't. I feel like we had to prove through the work that we did how it works for them to actually really digest it. Otherwise, it didn't really mean much. We share a little bit. I just felt like once we had results, their ears were wide open and really authentically wanting to hear what we had to say. Because we did share some, and I'm just not sure it landed. So I hope for others who are going out there to bring this into the world, I do think there's a need for research in this way to show this. So even in the university, I teach a class probably similar to what you teach, an undergraduate course, Intro to Yoga. And they get the yamas and niyamas and some yoga philosophy, dharma we call it, asana, pranayama, and some meditation. And I did a research study with almost 200 of the students. And what we found, what they self-reported helped them the most in their lives was, guess what you think? I already gave you a hint.
I would think meditation. I'm just thinking what my kids say to me. They are in shock about how they feel. Like when I ask them what was most meaningful or what did you take away, they just say, I've never felt like this before. So how about you? What did yours say?
Same, as the first time I felt peaceful. What the study showed was it was the pranayama and the dharma. That's what they took out. And that's not what they're going to get in most yoga studios. And that's not what most people think of when they think of yoga. And so that type of research to show that these are the 6-pointed star here that really can change people's lives, particularly in the younger years when they're developing and can use these tools. So yeah, I think education is a great place to start this. And as far as healthcare, I think there's great people out in the field making some some gain. I do think we need some new paradigms because, like you, I'm afraid if we shave off those, edges and just fit in the round hole, it's not going to work, and we might not get in the door.
Yeah, it's exactly what you said. If we try to be too much what they want us to be or what they think they want us to be, then we have nothing left, because they say, well, psychologists do that and so does that, right? And this idea of dharma and pranayama, dharma could also be called meaning and purpose, which there's a lot of healthcare organizations, including huge ones like the Veterans Administration, that want their people to have meaning and purpose. That is a huge deal. There's research to support that when you have meaning and purpose, your inflammation goes down, your blood pressure goes, there's so many great things that come out of that. So I think we need to grab onto dharma, or meaning and purpose, and the pranayama. Nobody else has that. And then, of course, the regulation of the autonomic nervous system, which if you can work with that, now you can have an impact on digestion and endocrine system and immune system, as well as the nervous system itself, right?
Absolutely. Like, I have this vision that everybody goes to their primary care physician and then they see the yoga therapist in the office for their tools. You just got a diagnosis. Well, here are tools to help you that include the dharma, that include all this. I absolutely down-regulate that HPA axis so that whatever you just got diagnosed with, you're going to hopefully have a much better outcome, as well as being able to cope with it. For sure. I feel like, there's spiritual health research that's out there, and there are these very simple tools that a doctor could give. And a lot of the criteria for spiritual health, like you said, meaning and purpose, ability to find peace in one's own life, things like this. And so interesting in that research is that people who score low on those have worse health outcomes, and vice versa. And yet, what does a doctor do when someone scores low? Typically, according to the literature, is they get referred for chaplaincy. But that only happens if someone's at end of life.
Right.
So this is a huge opportunity for yoga therapists to fill a gap that's out there that I feel like our small experience, we've been there for many years at the Venice Family Clinic, of our little microcosm there, of show how what we can do is it's cost effective, it's safe, and it can improve everything that you all do. And that's kind of what we said in Venice Family Clinic. Our medicine makes your medicine work better. Mm-hmm. That's really the message is our medicine is going to make yours work better. Don't you want that? That's
that's another reason I can see many hospital systems putting us in their health education department, because they're doing smoking cessation, diabetes control trainings. All of what we do is going to help all those other health education programs be much more successful.
Absolutely. And there's that accessibility. I'm curious what you think about, I have been, I guess, kind of the ad hoc advocate, healthcare advocate for patients who are elderly, who have been cycled through, as well as in my PT practice, where, I knew if they had this, it would be so much better off. But people don't have access or don't know that it exists. It's also very expensive, right? So right now it's private pay or programs where oftentimes it's the underserved who get that. So there's a big gap in the middle. And so I'm curious, I have some ideas of what are your thoughts on that? It was filling that gap.
I don't know. I think we could do a great job at that, but I think if we get too spread out, as you said before, and try to be everything to everyone, I think we're going to get lost. And my personal feeling is we need to stay focused on the regulation of the autonomic nervous system, the life purpose and meaning, and the breath work, and bringing peace into your life. Like, if we can make that our thing that we do, right? Not as technicians or yogapathy, but these are the areas that we can really help. I think people will naturally start to be like, oh, you could be an advocate for people who need someone to help walk them through the system. Like, I think all those other opportunities will flow from that. But I kind of feel to get in the door, we really need to stay focused.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I guess what I mean is, um, in advocating for them, I saw all these places that there were missing services that I think yoga, like where, in other words, they would have done so much better had they had a yoga therapist for exactly what you were speaking about, exactly for those reasons. And seeing all of that, seeing that, but there was nowhere to even get them. Even the people that I was helping, where other than referring them to a private pay yoga therapist, where I knew that would help them, it's not standard of care right now. And without the doctor saying, I think you should do this, it was like I had to try to convince them. And they're like, oh, yeah, that's nice, but I'm going to do what my doctor says I should do. So, whereas if the doctor says you should go do this, then that lane that you're describing, I totally, absolutely agree with you. And that's the really highway for the yoga therapist to be on. It's like the highway to health. We'll call this the highway to health and yoga therapy bus. This is how you're going to get there. Is I do think in a way, having it recommended, maybe where does that come
100%.
from? So people 100%. Will do it.
My own family, they don't really understand what I do, but if their doctor told them to do it, they would be all over it. So where do you see the field of yoga therapy in 5, 10, 15, 20 years? What would be your best case scenario?
Oh, I love best case scenario. Well, that's perfect. Where do I see it? Best case scenario, I kind of envision it similar to what you were saying with educational programs. I see it as programs for health, perhaps that people engage in, then maybe that will save them money in their insurance or whatever that is, where it's like they go to the gym, it's this
like wellness points or something.
Yeah. And I do think that it will be in hospitals. So just like people in the hospital, you maybe have a chaplain come by and see you, or you have a PT come by and see you, that the yoga therapist can be called. I really think hospitals I think that's going to be one of the places that it's going to, both for the healthcare professionals, because I think healthcare professionals need yoga. And I guess in the realistic world, I see it bringing it to healthcare providers who really need it. I heard Robin Tiger on your podcast talking the Stress-Free MD. Huge population she's talking about of health. So I think getting this to the healthcare providers will be probably a wise next step, who will then advocate for their patients to have it. And then I see it spreading like a road network of infrastructure everywhere.
And I think what you said earlier is those doctors, they really need to experience it. You cannot describe this.
Yeah.
They don't have the hooks to understand it, but when they feel it and they come out of burnout and they start to have joy in their life and they refine their meaning and purpose and everything's a little bit brighter, and wow, I don't have the pain and the depression, like that's it. That they have to have that experience for them to start advocating for it.
Absolutely. And it's fun. As you're saying that, I was thinking about in the yogic texts, there's some that talk about when Hatha Yoga came about, whereas that, like Patanjali Yoga is you're going to use the mind to control the mind, to change the mind. And then the Hatha Yoga comes about, oh no, you can use the body. So basically top down, bottom up, right?
Right.
So as you're saying that, I'm thinking about if we try to come in this top down, educating, telling them that it doesn't have a place to go because it's totally new. And so give a bottom up, give an experience, have the body teach the mind, this is what health feels like. And that I 100% think is the way to move forward and change in the paradigm of healthcare, or at least integrating yoga therapy and these concepts into healthcare.
And I think the mindfulness movement has already pretty much done the top-down approach. Most hospitals are totally excited about mindfulness, which we're so happy about. But why do they need anything other than that, right? Where we come in with embodied healthcare, where we're going from bottom up. And as we know, there's so much data from the body, the organs, the muscles, the tissues, coming up to the brain to tell the brain if we are in homeostasis or not, right? So we can kind of grab onto that embodied healthcare piece and say, this is how we're a little bit different and why you still need us.
I love that phrase, embodied healthcare. Coined that phrase.
It's on my website.
Embodied healthcare. It's just such a great phrase to describe it. And I think it's like yoga lifestyle as well. Mm-hmm. All the yoga counseling. Yeah. I think yoga counseling is a big piece to put in there. And there is a big question about the lane between yoga counseling and psychotherapy. And it's that lifestyle and the yoga philosophy, that coming back to that dharma and that meaning and purpose that does have discernment between mental health, because it's not the pathologized model. Yeah.
Not only that, but it's an exploration of the human spirit based in the ancient teachings of the ancient texts of India. That's very, very different than a Western clinical psychologist, which I respect and honor and think we need also. Mm-hmm. But it's not the same thing.
Yep. Yeah. And that circles all the way back to when you had asked, like, how did you get into this? And I think about that time, it was about 1991, 1992, that I had experiences in life that I did not know what to make of them. Mm-hmm. And saw a little flyer when, on the telephone pole, would they put staple up?
The staples?
Yeah, staple to a telephone pole was a flyer about yoga. And I thought, wow, I'm going to try that. And so I walked into this yoga class up these stairs, having no idea what I was walking into, just knowing it was something spiritual and maybe it would be good for me at that age where I think you're trying to figure out life. Like, what am I? Who am I? What is all this? And it was, I think back, it must have been a Kundalini class. Everybody was dressed in white. Mm-hmm. There was no instruction whatsoever. I was trying to follow along. They were doing something with their nose, and it was Nadi Shodhana I recognize now, but I didn't know what was happening. And they're standing on their heads and doing all the things, and nobody acknowledged me. And I left going, okay, that wasn't the class for me. But there's some curiosity about the energy in there. There's some flavor there of interest. And even when I go back to that, it was seeking something spiritual. And I do believe that we all have that part of the human experience. Is who am I? What am I? What am I? That is, and with all the technology, all of the external world, so much today, I think more than now than ever, there's a calling to step inward. All this social media, this interaction is, let's step inward for a moment and really remember who we are.
Before we got online, you had said that in this phase of your life, that's like a top priority for you right now. And you got a little teary. Can you just say a little bit about your own journey inward?
Yeah, I think about it kind of parallels my professional journey in that I went out in that, kind of householder phase of like getting out, working, and the belief you have to work, which is, it's great. Produce. It's all wonderful, except that my identity was confounded with that. Like, I was only as good as what I produced. Mm-hmm. And really doing my own yoga work, because I think, I don't know if you can relate to this, but a lot of other yoga therapists I know, the more that we get busy, the more we teach, the more programs we're in, the more we do, our practice falls by the wayside. And that, I just came to a point in my life where that's not okay. And so I had to step back. And there's a lot of fear about stepping back, because there's a drive to, I have to keep doing all these things. I have to be able to do it all. I have to be the woman who can do everything. And in pulling back, one of the drivers was recognizing some deep-seated grief. Staying busy can keep you. And I do realize that this life is about something else, and that's what it's been, and I make the most of it. But when we're not busy, whatever our individual pain is, I think all of us, when we step back, there's that pain to listen to, and then to really be with it and really listen to inward. And when we remember who we are, that divine essence is to fall in love with ourselves. And in doing so, it's falling in love with everybody. It's that unconditional love of every human, and I get emotional because all the clients that I work with, that's what I see is their beautiful divine essence. Even all my students, when they're struggling, and there's this personality level that we exist on, and it's dissociating from that and connecting on that cellular level, soul to soul, where, and not in a spiritual bypass way, not to discredit everybody's got their pain, but so that we can come together and heal our pains together and connect together. I think that's the yoga. And so I've been on that journey, that inward journey on my own. I think it's helped me to get more clarity in what is it in this chapter of my life I'd like to contribute, and not let that be directed by what I should do, what other people want me to do, what's expected of me, but to really think, how can I make this lifetime meaningful? When you said about meaning and purpose, Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, is what am I contributing and what's my legacy in this life? And how can I best all the work that I've done? You know, I had a patient years ago, brilliant medical researcher. And I said to him, the work you've put so much in, it's amazing what you've done. What happens when you go? Like, are you training someone? And he's like, I guess it just goes. And it broke my heart, because I think that if it just goes when we go, then was it about us? Because this isn't, I don't see that about me. I see this as we're collective here. And so what am I contributing to make the world hopefully a better place? How can I do that? And part of that's healing my own samskaras, and part of that's working with others. And so I think that's what drove me to what I'm doing now, is when I work with I work with graduate students at Loyola, is I love listening to what's their dharma, what's their path, what do they want to do? And how can I use what I've learned in my life to help them get self-agency, to get out there and do their work? That feels like where I've come to, because that gives me so much joy in knowing that I don't have the time or energy in my life to do that new thing. That person does. So let me share everything I can with you, and now you go do that, and then cheer them on. Yeah.
Well, Lori, where can we find you after this interview? I see that your website, do you want to tell us a little bit about your website and how we can find you?
Sure. Well, my website is to be updated soon. It's still reflecting in my physical therapy practice, because just as of this year, I'm making some big changes. So it will be updated, but you can still find me there with the same website. And that's mosaicpt.com. Mosaic, mosaic is all these different pieces put together to create something beautiful. And that's kind of how I see the work that I do, be it PT or anything else.
So www.mosaicpt.com.
Yes, mosaicpt.com, yes. And then also I'm at Loyola Marymount University in the Graduate Yoga Studies department. You can find me there as well. And through my Mosaic site coming soon will be some more the projects I'm working on the subtle body visualizations that we were talking about earlier, that my goal is to share those with the public so people can use those for their own well-being.
Wonderful. And you're also the co-founder and editor of the Journal of Applied Yoga Studies with Marlisa Sullivan and Meena Ramanathan.
And that's the J's, it's Digital Commons, a free open access journal. And I would love to put a plug for anybody who wants to give us a submission for the journal for publishing. We are looking for submissions. All the criteria is on the website.
So Lori, tell us where people can submit an article to the Journal of Applied Yoga Studies, also called J's.
Sure. Yes. Anybody who's out there bringing yoga to the world, we would love to hear from you. You do not need to have a clinical research study to submit. We're looking for theoretical papers. We want to hear what's the yoga that informed the work that you do out in the world. And the website is https:// digitalcommons.lmu.edu/Jays, Jays. And on the website, it has all the submission criteria. People can email me if they have questions, and I'd be happy to chat and hear about the work they're doing and discuss maybe how they could submit a paper.
Wonderful. And we'll put that in the show notes too. Thank you, Lori, for your time today. It was really nice to get to spend this afternoon with you. I miss you. We need to get together one day when this COVID thing settles down.
Yes, I want to get together and have a laugh fest and a fun fest. And it's just, I have so much admiration for you, and so I just feel so inspired by all that you do, and I feel honored to be here and spend this time with you. And yes, thank you for all you do. And so everybody knows, I do want to say one more little thing. When I was doing my yoga therapy training, you're my favorite teacher in the program, and I always felt like there was so much clarity in what you shared. And so I just want to acknowledge as one of my teachers. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. And I continue to learn from all that you're doing too. So thank you. I think in this interview with Lori, you heard the complexity of bringing this ancient yogic science of well-being and living well into a modern healthcare context, and how it almost is like a square peg trying to get into a round hole. And I think I've been quite honest and maybe a little bit blunt on this podcast in previous episodes, talking about not only my frustration with trying to figure out that puzzle, but sometimes even feeling a little hopeless. Like, is it even possible? Is this going to work? And I need to tell you that in the last 6 months, things have been shifting. There is something energetically shifting, and I'm thinking it's due to COVID. But I can tell you that many of our students at the Optimal State Yoga Therapy program are starting to get work. They're starting to go on LinkedIn and Indeed and apply for all sorts of positions that maybe they asked for a therapist, or maybe they asked for a play therapist, or maybe they asked for a arts and movement counselor, or maybe they asked for, a yoga teacher. Like, there's many different things out there that people are understanding this wellness, this salutogenic approach, whole health and well-being approach is so important, but they don't even know to ask for a yoga therapist. So our students have just been applying for these positions and getting them, and things are going really, really well. And so I'm starting to have a lot of hope that Western mental health care, as well as physical health care, is starting to understand that there is something about meaning and purpose and feeling peaceful inside and knowing who you are and having a sense of coherence in your life, to remove burnout from your life, that there's something that people out there want that maybe we can't quite put our fingers on, but the yoga therapists are bringing it. And the more we go out and do that work, the more people will understand what we do and experience it. And then they'll actually post a position for a yoga therapist. So I have hope that it's starting to happen. And one of the things I've decided in my life, because I am unwilling to shave off all of the edges and reduce yoga down to postures and breathing, I refuse to do that. Although I love postures and breathing, and that is a big part of what we bring, it's only maybe 20% of what we bring. And I've just decided in my own life and in my work and the programs that we run and this new mobile app that we are releasing May 2nd, 2022, as well as a new book that's coming out May 2nd, 2022, all of it, we are sticking to our guns. We are sticking with the holistic nature of yoga therapy, and we are not going to shave off the edges. And I don't know if it's going to work or not, but I know that it's important to stay true, and that our time will come And that if we try to be something that somebody else wants, if we try to please another and we give up our own sense of self and dharma, our own, this is what I bring and I'm going to own this. If we give that up, we have already lost. We've already lost. So the story that Lori told in the beginning about slowly coming to this realization about her work with the subtle body and visualization and how it's taken her a long time. And even now she's still kind of working to own that because it's not scientific. There's probably not a research study on that. I think we all just have to say, helping people find a sense of well-being, purpose, and peace is not only enough, it's where the goods are. It is the deal. And that is going to have a domino effect on high blood pressure, autoimmune disease, inflammation. We all have seen it working. So let's get out there and own that piece and not reduce ourselves down to just some postures and some breathing. Because if we do that, they don't really need us, honestly. They can use PTs who learn breath work, or they can use psychologists who learn breath work, right? We have to say that based on the ancient teachings of yoga, we have something really important, and that is salutogenesis. That is eudaimonia. That is a well-lived life, and we can help you do that. So please write us notes in the Facebook group called the Yoga Therapy Hour Facebook group on what you think about this. I'd like to start this discussion. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thank you for listening. We're up over 20,000 downloads now in just 10 months. And it's really exciting to see our community so galvanized and energized. And let's keep it going. Hey, did you know that each week on the podcast, we give you a free infographic that you can use with your clients, your students, or for your own personal studies? So check out the show notes. There's a link on where you can sign up. And not only will we send you the infographic from this week, but if there's a topic that's similar in the future, we'll also put you on that list. And we'll never sell your data or send you things that you haven't asked for. Thank you for listening to our show today. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share the episode with a friend or colleague. We're so grateful you're willing to share. Also, you could write us a review on most major platforms that host podcasts. Give us 5 stars if you appreciate the show and tell us what you love so that we can do more of that. Finally, we support several nonprofit organizations through this podcast. See the show notes to understand how you can help. If you'd like to be a guest or a sponsor for this program, contact us at the email welcome@theoptimalstate.com. welcome@theoptimalstate.com. And finally, a special thank you to our team here at Optimal State. We are truly a global family. George Mantuan, one of our executive producers. Adam Satchel, senior media producer and sound engineer from the Philippines. Krishna Panchal, a producer from Canada. Modupe Abdullahi, who does the show notes and is an editor for us from Nigeria. And Peter Morley, who wrote and produced the music for this show, who lives in Australia. Find more about Peter's work at www.zenmusic.biz. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.